Hello, I'm Simon from Kent Libraries, and this is On the Books, the library show born out of lockdown that talks about all things written word, thoughts, ideas, inspirations, and much, much more. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. Today on the books, we're on the road. I am not in my usual slice of Canterbury. The current lockdown has made things a little bit more difficult. So I am today sitting in my own home. I'm not telling you where that is, with the wonderful Lisa Cutts. And we're going to talk about everything and anything related to crime literature. Hello, Lisa. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hello, Simon. I'm very well. Thank you. Thank you ever so much for asking me to do this.
Oh, you are more than welcome. I've been looking forward to chatting to you. So it's been so. Let's hope this is a good one, really. I like to start, and we've done a few of these now, and it has become my starting question, and I do know that it is cruel, but I like to start as I mean to go on, and that is the question, what book changed your life?
It's behind me on the shelf. It's called Into the Darkest Corner by Elizabeth Haynes.
Ah, right.
It literally did change my life. At the time, I was working in Kent Police's major crime department at headquarters. I've since moved offices, but I was working at headquarters, and I went on holiday, as you do, and I took a stack of books with me, as I always do, and my Kindle. And I read a book a day. It was a lovely holiday. It's very relaxing. Madeira's great, but there's not a massive amount to do. Yep. So it was literally a book a day, and I read Into the Darkest Corner, and it changed my life because at the back of the book, it gave in acknowledgements lots of thanks to people who were serving police officers, were people I knew, people I'd worked with, friends of mine. I was thinking, who is this woman? And it turned out that Elizabeth worked in FIB, which is a part of headquarters. She was literally in the office above me. And because of security, I couldn't go into her office, she couldn't go into mine. So I didn't know her. We were feet apart from each other, the floor between us. So I emailed her afterwards, obviously in my own time, not in police time. Yeah. And I said, I loved your book, and I genuinely did. And I just, giddy with excitement that there was an old author that was sitting not far from me. And she said, would you like to meet and have coffee? And, could I, a bit cheeky, but could I pick your brains and ask you a couple of things about police procedural stuff in major crime? Absolutely, of course. And we became friends. And she is the most enthusiastic, inclusive person I think I've ever met, and she encouraged me to write. She's a big advocate of NaNoWriMo, which is obviously the month we're in now. Yep. Those who don't know, it's the challenge to write 50,000 words in a month, which I've never achieved because obviously I'm working full time. But she was so enthusiastic and encouraging that I literally, at the end of a half hour having a cup of coffee with her, went home and said to my husband, that's it, I'm writing a book. He said, yeah, right, okay. You're going to be a landscape gardener last year. You're going to open a vineyard the year before. And I said, no, I'm really going to do this. I'm really going to do this. And I just sat down, to be honest with you, didn't have a clue what I was doing. The enthusiasm far outweighed the expertise. And I just sat pretty much where I'm sitting now, but different chair, different computer, and just started writing. And the Nina Foster books came out of that, and it was a 40-something-year-old woman detective who liked a glass of wine and investigated murders for a living. So obviously there wasn't a massive amount of imagination in the character. But Elizabeth and her book literally changed my life.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing that someone was that close and you just didn't have a clue. That's fantastic. For those of people who aren't aware and didn't listen to the intro, Lisa is actually a serving police officer. She has a little bit of an advantage when it comes to writing crime novels, I think. We're going to ask about that later if that's considered cheating, but there we go.
I never thought about it as cheating, but yeah, I suppose it could cross the line a bit, yeah.
It's amazing, though, that you think you see these names on a book, and you see these names on a cover, and I've been doing this actually. I found it myself, and you suddenly realise that people that are these disembodied names that write this stuff that you are enthralled by are human beings not very far away from you. And it's been amazing actually doing the On the Book series because of Kent authors. I've suddenly sort of been putting faces to names and didn't realise they were all that close. Now I've walked past them in the street probably. It's amazing, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah, definitely.
So the book basically inspired you to write your own?
Yes, it did, yeah. That's
cool. That is very cool. Yes. In fact, actually, I was going to ask, but you kind of preempted me with the Nina Foster. It's like,
sorry.
Yeah, it's like, how much of a stretch was it to find Nina's character?
I started writing it, and it was one of those things where I thought, what do I know? I haven't got time to do any research. What can I just sit down and just pour out? It was quite cathartic, really, because every time something bad happened at work, I'd say, "This is all nonsense," said Nina. And it was, well, actually, it's in the first person, which was one of the reasons that I moved away from the Nina font. So it was, I said, obviously, as Nina, this is all nonsense. The police really winds me up because of the politics and the paperwork. But it was quite therapeutic to get that out there. But it was also, I did have to approach the Kent Police's legal department and just say, look, but first you had to get secondary employment clearance, because you have to do that whatever your job or activity, just in case you cross a line. And I also wanted to make sure that Libby wasn't doing anything wrong, because it's not based on actual investigations. They're not based on real murders that are investigated. But I wanted to just show people that the police, the investigation that you see on the news, that snippet in that it's just a couple of minutes, you know, people haven't got any idea what goes, and they shouldn't do, because hopefully murder is so rare and unpleasant that it really shouldn't touch them. But I wanted to just get across to the reader all the things that go on behind the scenes, and some of the humour as well. There is a lot of humour in the police, and some of the funny stories I have, just, if I'm honest, things that colleagues have told me. I always sort of say, can I just have a quick word? You know, that really funny story you told me? Can I just, because it was a couple of colleagues went out and they went and did an inquiry. They got in the car, they started driving away.
Yep.
One of them said, hear that? There's a cat in the car, and the cat had followed them out of the house and got into the back seat of the car. And I couldn't help myself. So anyway, remember, I put it in there. So I did say, do you mind? Obviously, I'm not going to use your names because it's two different characters, but can I put the cat story in there? They said, yeah, of course you can. But obviously, I embellished it, and they drive off and they've gone miles, and then they realise they've got the cat because it just fitted in with the story. So things like that I have openly people colleagues, but I always ask their permission, and of course they're nameless if they choose to remain nameless.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask that. I was going to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's great. It's brilliant. It's like, how often has real life kind of snuck into fiction, being that you live in that environment, you work in that environment? It's got to influence. That's what I was thinking. Well, you've just answered that, which is perfect. But what I was going to get to was how much you have to exaggerate real life when you're putting it into fiction, or how much would it surprise the reader that actually what you have put is either toned down or not exaggerated at all?
Some of it I've written, and an editor said, I don't really think that's likely to happen, and I've said actually it has.
Yeah, right.
And they, oh, okay, but I don't think people will believe you because it's just too coincidental or it's too bizarre. And you think, well, okay, you know, truth is stranger than fiction. So then there have been occasions where I think, well, I'm probably going to have to change that. Other people, you know, readers will just think you've orchestrated it, even if it's actually something that you've experienced. So I've always made sure, I've always prided myself on the fact that the police procedure aspects are spot on as I can. No. But there are occasions where I think, well, I probably need to move it away from that particular aspect, because it may also seem like I am just writing about a particular murder that I've worked on, whereas I haven't. But there have been times when I've got literally halfway through writing a book, and then they've said, we have another incident, so you need to go to wherever. And some of the circumstances are the same as what I've been writing, and I've had to go and see a supervisor and just know what I'm doing and say, I've got to tell you this. I've been writing this for months, and it's kind of mirroring what I'm working on. So they're like, we trust you not to just, you know, take your notes home and retype them up. So I think that sort of answered your question. I'm sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent.
No, perfect. Tangents are great. I love tangents. It's much more telling. The joy of doing this has been hearing authors actually speak about their experiences rather than just maybe answering a set question. So tangents are fine. Keep going with tangents. Yeah, I mean, I suppose I was going to come to the you get to that stage where you're like, I'm writing this and it's way too similar. I better stop. Or that sounds crazy, but I can see that actually happening. That's quite insane. Or you turn into being Angela Lansbury. And you know, Murder, She Wrote, and you know, you never invite Jessica Fletcher to a dinner party because someone will die.
That's absolutely, and it's one of the reasons I moved from the Nina Foster books, because they were all in the first person. I didn't want to come across, she's not supposed to be Superwoman. You will never, ever, ever, I don't care how good an officer you are, you will never investigate a murder on your own. There are a team of anywhere between 40 and 100 people doing various parts of it. I don't mean they're all investigating at one particular point in time. So I was quite keen to not have her as Superwoman, which is part of the reason I moved on to the Easter Egg series that I started, which I've got this agreement with Kent Police that I won't set them in Kent, but it's an incident room on the coast where you can see France on a good day. It doesn't really take much code cracking to work out. I'm talking about Folkestone. But I just wanted to move away from the first person. So I took one of the characters, Harry Powell, who was a DS in the Nina Foster books, promoted him. He was ever so pleased, moved him down to the coast and gave him his own incident room, and then put him through all sorts of hell. Poor old Harry.
We really have put him through hell, yeah.
Really has. He's had a tough old time as Harry. So it was good to move on in that aspect as well, so that I wasn't just stuck in what I was writing. And you do have to. You just have to. Personally, I had to keep moving. But I know some people have written 12, 15 in a series, and that's great. Not saying I would never return to either of those series, but I just feel I need a new challenge, something different.
That makes sense. You've got to write what's true to yourself, really, haven't you? You've got to write what works for you. At the end of the day, you are writing it. It might be for the consumption of your audience, but it's you that's going to put it on the page. So that makes sense to me. I do like the fact that you can actually see France from Bouverie House.
No, I probably exaggerate. You can see the sea.
Yeah,
France.
I mean, on a really clear day. I mean, if you're angling down towards Dover, the windows don't go. I mean, I've had the joy of working in Bouverie House.
Have you?
As an independent, I wasn't a police officer, but I was working for Kent Police doing something when I came out of law school. I was doing some work for them. Okay. So I do know Bouverie House, actually.
Yes.
Not from the point of being arrested. I just want to point that out.
There's definitely no view of France from the cell, so I know you're telling the truth.
Actually, right, yeah, okay. So I suppose the question I want to ask next then is, in light of what we've been speaking about, is what inspires you to write?
Having loved books, any writer will obviously say that, but having loved books so much, the fact that I've written books that some people have loved and enjoyed, and I just this morning I had an email from Myriad, who are my publishers for the Nina Foster books, from a retired police officer who has read all of my books and loved them, and it was just such a lovely email. And it was only a few minutes before I started this interview with you, and it just really, you think somebody's read them and loved them and enjoyed them, and they saw exactly where I was coming from, and I suppose it's about entertaining people, really, because what I've decided to do, I'm writing a cozy crime now, and I've loved it. I've absolutely loved it. I found it's it's a different tone, and it's a different, not even so much a different pace, but just a different mindset. And I think cozy crime is probably more about entertaining people. I mean, you don't probably pick up a book about murder and some of the grim stuff that I've covered in the book to be, I hope, to be entertained. It's more of a reading experience that you'll enjoy and take something away from, I hope. But with cozy crime, it is more about enjoyment, and I think it's just the fact that someone's picked up a book that I've written and they've read it and they say, well, that was really good, I really enjoyed that, what else has she written? And that's just a great feeling that someone's enjoyed it in some way and taken something away from it.
No, that's okay. That's I can't.
That was a bit waffly as well.
No, I'm picking that answer and I'm trying to find anything to. And it, once again, it makes perfect sense. It's if someone gets enjoyment from what you're doing. I mean, to be fair, anyone who creates something, if someone else enjoys it, that is the ultimate compliment, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And although I'm not on a sort of moral crusade, every one that I've written, I've tried to tell people a little bit of a story. Buried Sea, well, it's obviously a lot of a story, but Mercy Killing was, I worked on a historic child sexual abuse investigation, which was really tough going for us. So what the survivors went through, I can't even imagine. And I didn't want to write about that because that's not my account to give, that's their account to give, should they choose to. But it struck me is, what if we were investigating the murder of the offender who had abused all these people when they were children? How would our DCI come into the incident room every day and buoy us up to go out and find the murderer? Because a part of you is going to say, well, look what they did. Do I really want to find the people who have killed it? And of course, none of these people who were abused in the investigation I worked on, nobody did anything out of line. There was no hint of anybody taking the law into their own hands. But of course, people don't want to live in a world where the law is just, people are taking the law into their own hands. But it just struck me, how would he get us going on the investigation, and how would we carry on through? And that was when Harry Powell's, the first stage of his misery started in Mercy Killing. Poor old Harry, because he's the DI in the investigation.
I mean, I have to say, with Mercy Killing, you were very good at making you question assumptions. Now, I'm quite weird, and I do get that because I was very heavily trained to be into the advocacy side of law, where you do not go in with a judgment. It's a weird mindset, and people do not get that when you are trained to go in and go, it's not my place to make this call, it's this body here that makes that call. Everyone has human drives, and everyone thinks, things, but you have to separate that out when you're doing that side of things. So, but it does make you question it. It's like, because you are talking about someone who's done horrific crime, and you do question, it does make you really question. So I was going to ask, that was obviously intentional, and you've just explained where that came from. That whole sort of, but at the end of the day, justice has to be justice for anyone from any walk of life. The system has to work, I suppose. That would be my way of looking at it, being the person that advocates the system. But I get completely where you're coming from with the whole, how do you get yourself to do the best you can when in the back of your mind you're thinking that person deserved it. And human beings are like that. We are like that, aren't we? We believe, that certain people shouldn't be treated certain ways because they've done things in the past. So so you've actually gone into all of that, and I've just but yeah, I mean, I found it really interesting, Mercy Killing, because of that premise, and you've carried on in your novels challenging sort of assumptions, especially about policing and attitudes, and so that's a conscious choice on your part, I take it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to say everything about policing and everything about Kent Police is absolutely marvellous, because it's not. But what I do think that the police is quite good at, and it's often overlooked, is it does adapt in a lot of ways to modern life, and we're probably still far behind in technology, but we do react to things, and we have to, because that's what you do as police officer. You react to things around you, and I do think that there is a very forward-thinking element in a lot of policing that probably just gets overlooked, because there's so much goes on behind the scenes, and so many meetings and strategies and all sorts of things going on, that in day-to-day policing it doesn't really affect you, but you do need to obviously be aware of how things are evolving. And it has, I mean, even from, I joined in 96, and a lot of things were quite ad hoc about, say, your CID training. Yep. It was, the DS, anybody who hasn't done it, put your hand up, I'll put you on the list. Whereas now it is much more structured and professional, and as it should be. I mean, we all got there in the end. We all had the good training that we needed, but, it is a lot more of a pathway of development, rather than, there's a space, who wants to go, Yeah. I mean, not that long ago, it makes me sound like a bit of a dinosaur, but, we're only talking like late 90s. But it just, the whole approach to it is different.
Well, I mean, the police has gone through radical reforms at different stages, in responding to, I mean, PACE is the perfect example. I'm not going to go into that for the audience because they're not going to know. Let's leave that alone. But, the reaction to the 70s. But that did actually want me to bring me to a question that's slightly personal. How did your dad react being an officer when you decided that you wanted to be an officer?
He didn't really say all that much, really, if I'm honest. He was in the Met, and obviously I'm in Kent, so it was never, and pretty much he retired the year before I joined, so there wasn't really much of a crossover anyway. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't kind of, oh, that's brilliant, or don't do it. I think he was quite proud, but it wasn't like, well, I don't think you should. It wasn't it's dreadful. But, I wanted to do something that was a bit meaningful, and I'd heard him talk about murders that he worked on, not in any great detail, obviously. And I just thought, wouldn't it be brilliant to become somebody who works on part of a team that investigates murders and puts murderers in prison, and that was the whole aim of it, really.
Yeah, we need to move off of the policing, although it's fascinating.
Oh, sorry, yes.
No. I'm just thinking in terms of our audience, thinking about the literature, and we're like, yeah, we're talking.
Yes, we have gone a bit off.
So I'm going to ask another question from my list of questions, and I'm going to ask the one that's very self-serving. Normally, I'm in my library when I do these, but unfortunately, as I said, I'm currently not able to be there. So, what do libraries mean to you?
It's not just about the books. It's somewhere that you can go and you can just listen to what other people are talking about and what books they're picking up. And I do find, actually, usually I hang around the returns trolley, right, because I think if someone's borrowed this, it's probably quite good. It might not have enjoyed it, but if it's a book that's been returned quite recently, then I think, oh, if no one wants that, I can have that. But it's somewhere that you can get, obviously, books for free. You can borrow books and all sorts of audio books these days and downloads, but also it's somewhere that you can go and you know that you can approach the staff, you can speak to the staff. It's a place that you feel comfortable, and safe sounds a little bit of a naff thing to say, but it's a space where you can just be and sit and either chat to staff, read a book, just relax, really. Yeah, and right. I think they're a bit of a haven, I think, is probably a good word.
I like haven. I mean, I don't mind safe. Safe's actually quite. We'd like people to think that they were safe in our libraries. It's nice to hear you say that. It's because, from our point of view, we are a service that I don't want to say gets overlooked, because we don't, and we know that we're important. But you don't hear very often what you do for people. They come in, they do stuff, they leave. You don't kind of realise just how precious libraries are to certain people, and long may it continue to the high ups.
Yes, no, absolutely. I just think what a horrible, weird place it would be without libraries. And I think we take them for granted because they've just always, like the NHS, it's there, isn't it? Everyone moans when it goes wrong, but you hurt yourself, you go straight to the hospital or you ring your doctor. Same with libraries, they've just always been there. And I remember as a kid going to the mobile library, when it used to go round to it used to sit in the pub car park. And I just remember, thinking there's a whole van of books that's just around the corner, 2 roads away from where I live. How brilliant's that, and I can borrow whatever I want. And, as a kid, I read the eLibrary books. I couldn't afford to go and buy them, and most kids probably can't. I mean, I know these days you can get downloads for 99p, but you still, nothing's the same as just picking up a book and holding it. I love a download because it does mean you can literally take 1,000 books on holiday. You would obviously do that. But I just love holding a book. It's a completely different experience for me.
I completely get that. We are very proud of the digital offer that we give. And actually, lockdown first time saw a massive jump in our digital offer, which we were really happy with because it showed that people were still reading. And I know that during lockdown, book sales and reading shot through the roof. So can't complain from my point of view. But yeah, I mean, a physical book. There wasn't a talk when the Kindle became big, didn't there, that the books were dead. And not in any way, shape or form. We still love a book. But I mean, they've become cheaper, and that's the best thing because they're no longer the really expensive thing that you can get your hands on.
Yeah, and I think we had a Labrador that blessedly passed away before Christmas. But what did it for me was if I was ever reading a Kindle, he would nudge it out of my hand with his nose. If I was reading a book, he wouldn't bother me.
That's really insane. Cool.
I know, yeah. A really bizarre thing. So I thought, well, there you go. My dog prefers books to the Kindle. Then there's no competition. But they are great because you obviously can just sit at home, click a button, you can have the book delivered to you, especially through libraries. Wonderful, really wonderful.
Since you mentioned Kindles, we obviously live in a world that's device driven. I mean, we all carry, what we laughingly call phones. I love the fact that we still call them phones in our pockets. They haven't been phones for a very long time, have they, really? Although I do remember getting my first ever mobile phone where it was green and black screen and all I could play was Snake on it, and you could send really short text. I think it was a Nokia 3310, if I'm really honest. Really, and they were all small. That's what they were going for. And now it's all these huge, they're computers, aren't they? But going back to the question, so we live in a world of devices. They are everywhere. I mean, the younger generation are glued to them. Walking down the street, I'm surprised people don't walk into things more often. But do you think the written word still has a place in a world of screens and devices?
Definitely. I think one of the reasons as well is people like to show other people what they're reading.
Right.
And of course, you can only do that with a cover. And again, I did an event in a bookshop in Canterbury, and my first one, never forget, is the cover is in two different colours. There's although these are two different books, they're in that same colour. There's a blue and there's a brown, and a lady was buying one afterwards, and she said to her friend, "I don't like the blue. I'll have the brown." And I thought, well, it's exactly the same book, and it's, apart from the colour, it's exactly the same cover. But I thought that's really interesting. So I think that people are naturally drawn to something tangible that they can hold as well. And it is literally, she judged the book by its cover. And there's a reason there's that saying, isn't there? Well, you can't judge a book by its cover, is obviously the saying, but she did make an assumption that she would prefer reading one colour to the other, which is little bit strange, but yeah, that was her choice and her money. But I think people do, I mean, I've got a groaning bookshelf behind me, and if that was, I've got to be honest, I don't really know what I've got on my Kindle that's unread,
Right.
but I know every book behind me that's unread.
Right.
So I'm only going on, and it could be an age thing, obviously being brought up with books rather than devices, but I think people will always want to pick up a book and read it. I think there's something quite comforting about it. And I you know, you look at the sale of autobiographies and annuals and hardback books around Christmas time, people don't digitally send each other £20.
No, that's true. They do get physical,
yeah. But having said all that, it is wonderful, as I said earlier, to go on holiday with 1,000 books in your handbag or whatever, which you couldn't do if they were in paper. Well, you could. It'd be a very expensive flight, wouldn't it? Or need your own trailer if you were going on holiday in this country.
Yeah, it's like, what are you taking with that shipping container? Nothing.
Just my library.
Library, yeah. I was sort of one of the people I've interviewed, Joseph Coelho. He was talking about the modern age, although it's device driven, it's still actually massively word driven. So the written word still has a place, because social media is predominantly, I mean, you've got images, but a lot of it is short form. Twitter, for example, short form words. So it's interesting. But yeah, I think books, you're right, they're not going anywhere, not anytime soon. There is something wonderful about smacking yourself in the face when you fall asleep with your book rather than your Kindle.
Definitely.
Okay, so as someone, if someone is trying to begin to write, I want you to give some advice now, or how you deal with it. Because the one thing I've learned doing this is every writer approaches everything differently. And that's been wonderful to hear, that there is no right way to write. But you have the dreaded blank white page screen in front of you. How do you start?
I used to, and this saw me good for 6 books.
Right.
Bit of an idea. Right, I'm just going to sit down and hit the keyboard and see what happens.
Yep.
And I just kept going, and because I did have the benefit of, if I was working on a murder, what could happen, what would be a likely next step, you know, the bloody knife is found, or a witness comes forward, or there's something on CCTV. So I had that benefit, and so if I ever got stuck, I just kept going with that. The downside of all 6 of those books is that they have taken quite massive rewrites and edits.
Right.
If you're starting out, that's sort of so far in the distance, you're probably thinking, well, I just want to get the words down. That's great. I've taken the very unusual step of now actually planning what I'm writing in the one I'm doing now. But I've actually found it's working really well. And it could be that I've had a little bit of a break because I haven't written anything for a while. But I've found that it's flowing a lot more naturally, because in my head I'm thinking, right, okay, this is where this next bit comes in. But what I would say is, if plotting doesn't work for you, don't do it, because I found it very boring, that even the thought of plotting a book, because I think, well, if I know what's happening, then I might not be as interested as I would be if I didn't know what was happening. And I've got to keep the reader turning the page button. And I thought, if I just keep going and I'm surprising myself, then hopefully I'm going to surprise the reader. So the downside of that is, when you come to the end, you have a lot of rewriting and editing to do. But for a very first draft, debut, somebody just starting out, just keep going, somebody, Harlan Coben, I think it was, said you can change bad words, you can't change no words. He's absolutely right. If you've got 20 blank pages, there's nothing you can do about it. You've got 20 pages that aren't quite right, just keep going, just edit it, change it. Once you've got those words down, and it's lovely to see the word count go up as well. And you think, right, Ray, I'm halfway through, I'm 3/4, I'm nearly there. You know, it's lovely to see that.
Yeah, so is it little victories with the word count? You just see it ticking over. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, I was going to ask about plotting as well, actually, purely because. No, don't. It's great. It's nice to know we're on the same wavelength for where I'm going to go with this. Purely in terms of crime novels, obviously. I mean, obviously, you were much more police procedural. Although it is interesting you going into cozy crime. Actually, I might change my question very briefly and go, for the uninitiated, what is the difference between procedural and cozy crime?
I'd say, in a nutshell, it's probably police procedural, much grittier.
Yep.
And the murder is the all-consuming thing. It's all about how the police are going to investigate that and how they're going to get the perpetrator and get them put in prison, although normally it doesn't go through by the trial part. Cozy crime, the murder, I wouldn't say the murder isn't important, but it's almost kind of not that central. It's all about the characters, the setting, telling the story and building up the mystery and a few red herrings perhaps, and it is a bit lighter, really. I mean, I love the Agatha Raisin series. I just love her books, and if I could just create something like that would give anybody as much pleasure reading as it's given me over the years, you know, then how brilliant would that be for me? No,
that makes, I get where you're coming from on that one. Yeah, that I'm sure that you will. I really am sure that you will.
Oh, thank you. I mean, obviously, MC Beaton is just like one of my all-time favourite authors, and you just think, wow, you know, the amount of books over her lifetime she wrote, you know, it's just incredible, absolutely incredible, and also brilliant too.
Well, on that note, sorry, careful viewer, the cat has decided to invade. I knew she would. She can't resist the camera. On that note, then, what authors do you admire, respect, or love? Who would you be your inspirations as an author?
Agatha Christie's always been my favourite. I love all of her books. I probably haven't read them all, but I've read most of them, and can read them again as well, which is something I don't normally do. But it would be Agatha Christie, MC Beaton, and you know, I've met so many brilliant crime writers as well over the years that have become friends and people that I've done lots of different events with. Julie Wasmer, I know you know Julie, her book's incredible. William Shaw, they're all people I know, and I, you know, not only are they lovely people, but their books are so good, and you just think, wow, you know, when you're chatting to them and they say, oh yeah, I've got this idea, and now and again, you know, that somebody might ask me for a bit of police procedural advice, and I think, oh, just get on and write it because I want to read it, you know. It's just lovely. There's just not enough time in the world to read all of these books, but yes, so definitely Agatha Christie and MC Beaton will be my most favourite authors, but there are so many others as well that I just love it.
Yeah, it's that. I mean, MC Beaton is ridiculously popular at the library. Her stuff goes out just out the door like no tomorrow. And Agatha Christie is never going anywhere. In fact, there was I'm a geek. The constant viewer is now realising just how much of a geek I am. There's a Doctor Who episode where they say that Agatha Christie is read for the entirety of human history. It's all to do with the fact that she disappeared for a while. Her disappearance when her marriage disintegrated. But yeah, they make that all fantastical. But the punchline of the episode is that she is read for the entirety that humans read books, which is a really nice, you know, thing to say.
I've seen that episode and it's one of my favourite.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it's just so good. And I've got, I don't know if I've still got it, but it was one of the very old Agatha Christie books with a massive big wasp on the cover.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, but that was, I don't understand. Oh, it's the time-space continuum. Anyway, another tangent there. I don't even know what a time-space continuum is. Don't quiz me on that.
We'll make it up. I think that's what they do.
Science fiction, you're right. I just make it up, yeah.
Okay, moving on from that then, is there any one book you wish you had written? If you could have written any one book, what would it be?
Probably the book that stuck with me the most, I read as a child, was 101 Dalmatians.
Okay.
But that's just sprung to mind, and that's a really good question, and I don't really know why I've just thought of that book.
That's why I like it, because people usually jump with their first answer, and that's
Yeah.
the thing.
Yeah, and not just because of the Disney franchise and everything, but it was I just remember reading that book as a, I don't know how old I was, 8, 9, I've got no idea, but just loving it and just thinking, what an absolutely fantastic book, and being slightly disappointed when I saw the cartoon.
It's like not quite what the book does, is it?
Yeah. But yeah, it was. Oh yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you very much. Just so you know, you're not the only person that has said 101 Dalmatians.
Oh really? Oh wow.
Someone else also said 101 Dalmatians, which is quite interesting. Okay, so I think I want to move on to something that's a little bit more, I don't want to say serious, but important. Lockdown. We are now, just to time this and put this into time perspective, we're in lockdown 2 point whatever it is. We've dealt with 2020's first lockdown, but beforehand, and especially with policing, actually linking back to what you do, I know that police has a massive role in this now. Mental health, or positive mental health, has become a very hot topic. I mean, it should have been for a lot longer, if you ask me, but it's become quite important. So I like to ask authors where you think reading or writing fits in with positive mental health.
Reading, absolutely, because I think the thing about picking up a book is you can take yourself off anywhere in the world and you can escape where you are at that time. If I'm honest, during lockdown, I didn't do any writing because I just wasn't in the right frame of mind.
Yep, fair.
In lockdown 1.
Yeah, lockdown 1.
I didn't do any at all. But was incredibly busy, and I took on a sort of a new role, and I was doing a supervisory role, so it was all new to me. So I didn't really have time to spend on writing and give it my full attention because I had other things going on, which is probably a little bit of a telltale sign of things are obviously they weren't right for people, including, although I didn't feel that I was under any particular mental pressure, I did know that I couldn't clear my mind enough to write.
Yep. Now,
I think having come out of the first lockdown with quite a lot of optimism, I was able to then start writing, and it was great, and I felt that I was in a better space than I had been for a long time, just because I needed a little bit of a break even before lockdown. But I think with reading as well, I had read a few books at the beginning of lockdown.
Yep.
And then I'd stopped reading, and I'm currently reading Dear Mrs. Bird, which is absolutely phenomenal. Right. Absolutely loving it. And I can't put it down, and I keep thinking, right, I've taken a few days off to do some writing, but I really want to finish reading this book. Because it's just, although it's set, as you know, during the Second World War, it's obviously not a good time in history, but there's a lot of humour in it, and I'm taking myself off to a different time and place. And I think that's the most important thing about reading. It just sparks your imagination, and it often makes you think of other things whilst you're reading. Yeah. And the same with audiobooks as well. If people haven't got time to sit and read, I think audiobooks are brilliant, because I've done some gardening in the summer, and I just had my headphones in listening to a book, and gardening and reading, well, having an audiobook read to you, I mean, you can't get more relaxing than that. I was almost comatose in the garden. So I think it's really important that people allow their minds to have a little bit of a holiday from where they are, as difficult as that's been during lockdown.
Yeah, no, okay, I agree with the audiobooks, actually. I mean, audiobooks have almost brought the art of storytelling back. Actually, I'm quite a big history fan, and I like going to English heritage events. And quite often in the summer, like a few years ago, they had storytellers that would just come and tell you a story, and you were captivated by this person that held your attention, just telling you a story. And human history has been the history of storytelling. We have always told stories. So I kind of like audiobooks, because it is kind of that again, you plug yourself in, and like you say, someone is telling you a story. It's absolutely awesome. So yeah, I'm with you on the audiobook front. I mean, I think that is absolutely the way forward. Well, no, I like to read too, but you're right. Plugging in an audiobook is absolutely lovely, and can transport you, absolutely transport you, completely and utterly. So yeah, I can't find anything to even remotely disagree with you on it. Do you have any books that you return to? I mean, you say you don't do it very often. But you said like 101 you might reread again. Do you ever return to it books?
I tend not to, unless I've been enjoying a series and I want to just remind myself of what the last instalment was. But I don't normally return to a book. So apart from Agatha Christie's books, I have reread some of them, and I think that even if you know the ending because they're so brilliant, it doesn't matter. Because
they're beautifully written, aren't they? You know exactly. It trundles along perfectly, and it's such paced so well. And yeah, I'm different to you. I return to books quite often. I find them quite comforting to go back to certain stories I've read before. Mainly actually with the mental health thing. It's almost like this is my safety blanket type thing. I feel I'm wrapped in a world. I mean, I read Lord of the Rings once a year, every year, because I am a geek, I've said before. With the audiobook, I got my friend for the first time ever to not read, obviously, but listen to Dune, which is one of my favourite books ever. And she was like, I would never have read this, but I'm so glad I listened to it. So I don't know where I'm going with that point. Let's just move on.
Well, I mean, I think the great thing about audiobooks as well, if you've got somebody who's partially sighted, or perhaps they even, their reading isn't great, they can still enjoy the book, and that's what it's about. It's about enjoying it rather than, as I said earlier, people, sitting on trains, not at the moment, but holding up a book and people saying, "Oh, aren't you clever? You're reading that." But it's not about that. It's about you enjoying what you're listening to or what you're reading.
Yes, very much so, very much. Sometimes I make me wonder if people are sitting there with certain books going, look at me, I'm reading this book. I'm not really reading it, I'm just doing it so it looks like I'm reading this book.
There's another book inside you, really, that they're actually enjoying, yeah.
Moving back, once again, returning back to the crime for a second. How do you, I mean, I'm imagining the other part of our job that we do here is in the library is actually registration. So we deal with death registration, and you end up developing I would say a dark sense of humour around it because you encounter grief and that all the time. So I was going to ask, in the policing, there must be a very dark sense of humour going on with some of what you're coping with. Do you find that filters into your books? Do you want to get that across, or do you shy away from it?
I definitely try to, but there are occasions where I don't know that it would always
be appropriate.
Yeah, in the real world, as I call it, people, they don't do that. I mean, I've been to horrible houses, and I wrote about a scene in Never Forget where they go into a house and it's and the woman's smoking all over her child, and I went to a reading group one evening, and these very lovely ladies were, well, if you happened to come across a child in those circumstances, wouldn't you call social services and take the child away? And I thought, you haven't really got an idea of how many of, if you took every child away because its parents were smoking near it, there would be a lot of children in care. Needlessly, in a lot of situations, I'm not saying it's all right to smoke over your child, of course I'm not, but the child might have been perfectly fine other than the fact that their parents smoked, and they kind of missed the point really. And I thought, well, that just didn't translate well into your world, because fortunately you don't live like that. So I have in the past stopped myself from writing other scenes like that, because I think a lot of readers just won't comprehend that that's not acceptable.
Right. Okay. No. Yeah. Right. That's a really interesting answer. It's just great listening to the choices that go into what you put on a page. I think the process of writing is completely alien to a lot of people. They don't understand how you get from your idea in your head to what goes on the page, and the sheer level of work that goes into creating or deciding or choosing what actually finally ends up out there. And I think it's fascinating to listen to authors sort of talk about that process, because it's enlightening, because you suddenly go, oh right, I hadn't really realized that level of care or concern or just things you have to think about in order to get what you want on the page happen. So I find that also really fascinating personally.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been really interesting for me as well. You know, just going through stuff with an editor where I'd written one scene in the second book where I'd had the police officer that their mobile phone's battery had run out.
Yeah.
And she said, well, obviously that would never happen, would it? Because a police officer would never go out with a battery that wasn't fully charged. And I thought, oh no, you're right. Yeah, that's so yeah, quick rewrite there. Yeah, okay, you're right. That wouldn't work. Yeah. So it's just funny, like you say, the things that end up on the page that you didn't necessarily think you were going to head that way. But
did you ever want to go? They're human beings, police officers. They're fallible. They make mistakes like everyone else. Sometimes they don't see the blindingly obvious, or they make a stupid mistake. And other times they see the sublime. I mean, it's just, you know.
Yeah.
So I really am curious. If you weren't writing crime, what other genre would you fancy having a go at?
I suppose it would be more sort of tending towards just contemporary fiction of more aimed towards women, I guess, mainly because more women tend to read. I think, general sweeping generalisation, tend to read fiction more than most men. So it's probably something, the kind of books over the years that I've read, because I probably only read about 1 in 3 as crime fiction, because if I'm writing, I find it distracting. The last thing you want to do is then subconsciously sort of steal a huge chunk of one of your colleagues' work. But also I find it a little bit off-putting. So when I'm writing, I tend not to. But I read anything really. It's any kind of fiction, whether it be historical or women's or kind of even sort of a rom-com chick lit. I quite enjoy that now and again. Just a bit of a light, easy read. It's just great fun, and I enjoy that. But I suppose it would be more just general fiction for contemporary women's fiction, really.
Yeah, no. I mean, variety, isn't it? You can't. We like to pigeonhole people, but the reality is that people aren't pigeonholed. We're made up of a whole range of different influences and likes and dislikes. And I don't know why we like to do that. It's like, oh, they must write crime, therefore that's must all they think about. I don't know why we do that.
Well, I think publishers like to do that because they want to be able to say to potential readers, if you enjoyed that, then this is similar. And I guess, in the library, you need to be able to put it in a certain section of the library. But it is helpful. It is helpful to be posted in the right direction if you're looking for a particular thing. But also, some of the best books that I've ever read and enjoyed have just been, I'm going to pick that up because it's there on the shelf in the library, or it's there on the shelf in the bookshop, or I'm going to download that one because that looks like it's my sort of thing.
Yeah, I was once given a piece of advice by a teacher, and it's steered me well in life. And it goes to like what you were saying about being at the returns point of a library, is that he advised me that if you're ever recommended to read a book, read it. You might hate it. It might not be your cup of tea in any way, shape or form, but it's been recommended to you by that person for a reason. And it can be very telling about them, or just introduce you to something you would never have even contemplated picking up before. So yeah, that has steered me well over my life. I've ended up reading things I would never have touched with a barge pole, and actually ended up loving it. So yeah.
No, absolutely. I recommended H.G. Wells's, I think it was either The Time Machine or The Invisible Man to a colleague who said, science fiction, I don't think so. Read it and said, that was amazing.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, yeah, he's written many more. So it just goes to show you, like, as you said, I recommended it because I just thought it was something completely different for her.
I mean, the genius thing about H.G. Wells is when he was writing. That's the bit that always gets me.
Oh, I know.
It's like, hang on, he was writing then, and he's talking about concepts that are current now. I mean, you see it it's just so ahead of his time in terms of, the Time Machine is just an amazing story. I could whitter on about H.G. Wells for ages.
I don't think they've covered that in Doctor Who yet. Have
no,
they had H.G. Wells? Oh, there you go then.
They have. Yeah, they've touched H.G. Wells. I don't know why. He'd seem like a really obvious choice, wouldn't he, really?
Yeah, I would have thut so. Perhaps they just thought, too much time travel-y.
Yeah, too much timey-wimey stuff.
Wibbly or whatever it is they say.
Bow ties are cool. No, that's...
Oh, I was watching one. I'm sorry, I'm going off on another tangent. I was watching one of the episodes yesterday with the haunted house. I can't remember what it's called, but with Gemma. No, what's her name? Gemma Louise Coleman. And
yeah. Oh, trying to
Emma Grayling. Emma Grayling, is it the psychic?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, that was. I haven't seen that for a long time. That was so good.
Okay, who's your favourite Doctor?
See, I'd have to go with Doctor Who because he was my Doctor growing up. But I have to say, David Tennant was a whole new ball game. And then along came Matt Smith. I don't know. It's also difficult. But I'd have to go with Tom Baker because he was my Doctor growing up.
Yeah, okay, I get you that one. And his voice. I mean, his voice. Is just, yeah.
Brilliant.
I mean,
what about you? Who's yours?
My favourite Doctor. Yeah, see, it's a hard one. See, I came into Doctor Who when BBC had started to run it down the first time around. So I really came into it with Sylvester McCoy. I just sort of caught the crossover between, was it Pete Davison and Sylvester McCoy? So I just caught that crossover. So I came sort of into Doctor Who when I was growing up with Sylvester McCoy and then sort of latched into the older ones. And obviously Tom Baker was, it's always the scarf and the hat, really. I mean, the modern ones, it's a hard one. See, I loved David Tennant. I mean, I quite like Chris Eccleston, actually.
Yes.
Actually, fantastic. I'm getting really off. I mean, but I love David Tennant. Matt Smith, it took me a while to warm to. I thought Peter Capaldi was really good, but the writing for him wasn't fantastic. I thought he could have been much better. I mean, I really liked a darker, more broken Doctor in light of everything they've done with the storylines before. And I don't think the writings served, what's her name? Jodie. Oh, God, her name's gone out of my head.
It's Jodie Whittaker.
Jodie Whittaker. I
think it's Jodie Foster then. I don't
know. Not Jodie Foster. Jodie Whittaker. I don't think the writing served her too well. I mean, I think she's a really quirky, interesting Doctor. So to answer your question, I would say, actually, I know which one was my favourite Doctor. John Hurt.
Oh,
Day of the Doctor, the special episode they did where they had all three.
He was very good. He was very, very good. Well, he's John Hurt, isn't he? He's brilliant and everything. But yeah.
But no, if I had to do one of the series, I would probably go with Tennant. I thought Tennant, especially his ending, I don't want to go.
Yeah. Well, no, it was. I was watching him. Well, we don't want you to go. I stay.
I mean, Matt Smith. I mean, he jumped off running. I mean, he became very, very intricate as he went along. Actually, I mean, I think Doctor Who gets disparaged, but he's actually got some really interesting ideas running all the way through it. And the way that they do the character of the Doctor is quite fascinating. Would you ever consider writing screenplays?
Oh, yes, and probably my biggest dream in the whole wide world would be to write an episode of Doctor Who.
Right.
But I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Actually, I don't even know where it's wibbly wobbly timey-wimey. I'm not even sure what the right saying is or what the time space continuum is. So they're probably not going to come knocking soon. But that would be amazing.
I got ridiculously excited when one of my favourite authors of all time was announced that he was writing Doctor Who, a couple of episodes, and I have watched those religiously. So my favourite author of all time is Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman. The book that changed my life was Neverwhere. The first time I ever read that. One line. It wasn't so much that they turned the light down as they turned the darkness up, and that was it. It's just like that whole concept. I wanted to write that. But yeah. So yeah, we're going completely off the topic. I'm talking about me. Stop that. I suppose. I mean, we've had a wonderful chat, but we're going to have to sort of start wrapping it up. So I suppose I really need to ask, what's next for you?
Well, the cozy crime that I'm writing is the start of what I hope is a new series, set in a fictitious part of Kent. It's an amalgamation of many small villages and some of the beautiful parts of the country. And I'm hoping that if that takes off, then that could be my next series. But I've always in the back of my mind had returning to Nina Foster at some point, and it was always going to be 3 to 4 books. And as I said earlier, I ended up moving away from those and writing the Eastwise series. But I would still like to write another Nina Foster book. I'm probably about a third of the way through it, and it would be good to have the new series and then some more Nina, and you never know, perhaps an episode of Doctor Who.
Doctor Who.
Oh, wouldn't that be great?
I mean, Don't Trust Him came out this year, isn't it? That's the last of the Harry Powell for now.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you when you got to the point where you think I'm not going to do any more, was that a relief, or was that just we'll see where I go next?
It was a relief at the time because I'd enjoyed writing them, but I felt that the time had come to end that particular series and move on. And I think I needed a bit of a break as well. I was changing roles at work, so I needed to give that my full attention. And it's as great fun as it's been. It's always been a job that I've had to fit in around policing. So I got to the stage where I thought, well, I don't want to do two jobs badly, so I need to concentrate on one until I'm in the right place to continue. And now I am, and I'm loving writing again. It's really been great. I probably haven't enjoyed writing as much for a good couple of years, and I think that probably tells me something, that I just needed that break, which is great.
No, if you've got the joy of it, that will also come across in your writing, actually, to the other end. If you've got a love for it again, then that will translate to the reader, I should imagine. This is just going to sound like a strange question. Did you find it easy to write a man as a woman as your main character? I'm just curious.
From the Harry Powell?
Yeah, getting in the headspace.
I did actually find it quite easy because Harry was a bit of one of the officers I used to work with did ask me one day who I based him on. And I said, and I didn't want to be rude because this person had been my boss at one point, but I said, he's kind of the boss we all really want.
Right.
He's the boss that will stand up for us, who will put his own neck on the block and will make sure that his team come first. And I think once I kind of got into that, it was a lot easier to think how he would think as a man. And I also get, although my husband never reads fiction, obviously I'm making him read mine. And I like to think, he's a retired police officer. He would say, well, why would you be thinking that? Why would you be doing that? So it was also having somebody just doing an in-house editing for me, I suppose. But I actually found him quite easy to write because I suppose over the years I've worked with so many fellas, and my dad was a policeman, my husband was a policeman, and I think that helped me get into the mindset as well a little bit easier than otherwise I would have been able to.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been fascinated by women who write men and men who write women, and whether or not they get them right. It's just a thing I think in my head, really, because I don't think that the sexes are actually massively different, and anyone who does say that, I think is really, really quite silly. But we don't always think the same.
We don't. No, you're absolutely right. We don't.
I mean, slightly on that note, how was it being in, as a woman in the police force, which was really heavily male dominated for quite some time? I mean, it's not anywhere near as bad as it used to be, but when you first went in, it was quite heavily male dominated.
There was probably, on the intake I was on, roughly about a third women, 2/3 men. There used to be a lot less women because when women got pregnant and had children, they tended to go on a career break and then not really come back because the jobs weren't there for them. Now it's a completely different setup, and the situation is, if you need to work flexible time or part time for childcare, then it is a lot more approachable and a lot more amenable than it ever was in the past. So I mean, now I probably work with probably nearer 45% to 50% women, and I've sat in an office on many occasions in major crime and looked around and thought, actually, there's no men in here. It's all women. And so I suppose it's just a change of the way things are. And, sometimes there's, you look up and you think that they're all men. It's just changed. It's just evolved over the years, really.
Well, you would hope it would evolve. I'm just wondering, I'm trying to think of TV series. And actually, there's some really strong female detective characters out there now, isn't there? Yeah, it's good. Just musing in my head there, really. Right. Okay. Well, on that note of that rather strange musing, I have to say I think we have run out of time, which is a real shame. But it's been an
Oh,
absolute joy to have you on the show. It's been fantastic just to chat with you about everything and everything, and Doctor Who. I mean, who'd have
Doctor Who.
thought that?
Oh, thanks so much. It's been wonderful. Thank you. It's been really good fun.
I've really enjoyed myself. Just a quick note: how far away are we from your new novel? How many years are we down the line?
Oh, if somebody kindly said yes, we'll publish it, it would be next year. I'm hoping to have it finished by the end of this year in its first draft, and then I mean an editor might say, oh, I don't think so. This is nowhere near ready. Let's start again. But hopefully, I'm not too far off track. And the fact that I've enjoyed writing it either means it's flawless or it's rubbish. It's one of the two. I don't know.
Well, I really hope that we see it relatively soon, and I can't
Thank
wait for it. Thank you very much.
Thanks ever so much, Simon. Thank you.
Cheers. Well done. You made it to the end. Thank you for listening to yet another On the Books. Lisa's work can be found in the library or at any good bookshop. If you'd like to know more about our digital services and offers, then please visit kent.gov.uk/libs, linked below. Or if you'd like to know what we're up to on our social media, follow our Facebook page, also linked below. This is Simon from Canterbury Library, signing off.